You're just a useless little intern, and nobody here cares what someone like you thinks.
I'm trying to do the job you gave me and speak when something seems wrong.
People like you should be grateful for a chance, not act like you belong here.
I belong here as much as anyone else, and I deserve basic respect from you.
Respect is earned, and right now you're nothing but another replaceable teenager wasting my time.
If that's really how you see me, then I guess you've already made up your mind.
Gladly. Pack your things and leave before you embarrass yourself in front of everyone again.
The CEO pointed toward the elevators, while the teenager quietly picked up his cardboard box. He walked away without arguing as the CEO watched him leave with a smug smile. The CEO had no idea the teenager he just humiliated controlled the $150 million investment keeping his company alive. The afternoon sun streamed through the glass walls of Westbridge Technology's 32nd floor as Malik Carter hunched over his laptop, double-checking numbers for the third time. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling data from different spreadsheets and cross-referencing employee records. The conference room buzzed with quiet activity as other employees prepared materials for Grant Holbrook's board presentation. Elena Brooks sat beside him, reviewing quarterly performance metrics on her tablet. She glanced over at Malik's screen, noting his focused expression. "How's the retention analysis coming along?" she asked quietly. Malik paused, his brow furrowing as he stared at the numbers. Something doesn't look right. He pulled up another file, comparing the employee headcount from 3 months ago to the current roster. "Elena, can you check this with me?" She leaned closer, studying his calculations. Malik had organized the data clearly, with separate columns showing employee departures, new hires, and overall retention percentages. The official figure showed a healthy 87% retention rate across all departments. "The number looks good," Elena said, then noticed Malik scrolling through additional files. "What are those?" "Terminated employee records from the past quarter." Malik's voice dropped lower. "Look at this. 43 people were let go in the last 3 months. Most of them entry-level positions in customer service, warehouse operations, and data processing." Elena studied the list carefully. She recognized several names. Good employees who had been dismissed during what management called routine workforce optimization. Malik pulled up the retention calculation again. These terminations aren't included in the board presentation numbers. If you add them back in, our actual retention rate drops to 72%. "That's a significant difference," Elena murmured, understanding the implications immediately. 15 percentage points, Malik confirmed. "The presentation makes it look like we barely lost any employees this quarter. But we actually dismissed more people than usual." Elena felt her stomach tighten. The board presentation was scheduled for 2 hours, and Grant expected these figures to demonstrate Westbridge's operational stability to potential investors. A 72% retention rate told a completely different story than 87%. "Are you sure about the calculation?" she asked. Malik turned his laptop toward her, walking through each step methodically. "Here's the total workforce from January 1st. Here are the departures through March 31st. The math is straightforward." Elena checked his work twice. Malik was absolutely right. The excluded terminations were legitimate employee departures that should have been counted in any honest retention analysis. "Grant's going to present this to the board in 2 hours," she said quietly. "If these numbers are wrong—" "They're not wrong," Malik interrupted. "They're incomplete. There's a difference." Elena looked around the conference room. Tyler Keene sat at the far end of the table reviewing financial projections on his laptop. Grant's assistant was arranging presentation materials near the projector. Everyone was busy preparing for what Grant had called the most important board meeting of the year. "You need to tell someone," Elena said. Malik saved his corrected calculations to a separate file. I'm telling you, you're my supervisor. But Grant approved these figures personally. He signed off on the retention analysis yesterday. Then he signed off on incomplete information. Malik's voice remained calm, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. Elena, if I put my name on this presentation knowing the numbers are misleading, that's not doing my job correctly. Elena understood his position. She also understood the delicate politics of challenging executive decisions, especially as a temporary intern. Let me think about how to handle this. There's nothing to think about, Malik said simply. The numbers need to be corrected before they're presented to the board. Before Elena could respond, Grant Halbrook's voice carried across the conference room. How are those retention figures looking, Elena? Elena's pulse quickened. Grant was walking toward their end of the table, his expensive suit impeccable, and his confidence radiating authority. Tyler followed a few steps behind, tablet in hand. We're just finishing the final review, Elena answered carefully. Grant stopped beside Malik's chair, glancing at the laptop screen. Good. The board needs to see we've maintained workforce stability during the restructuring. 87% retention sends exactly the right message. Malik looked up at Grant. Actually, sir, I found some discrepancies in the calculation. The room seemed to grow quieter. Grant's expression shifted slightly, his smile becoming more rigid. Discrepancies? The retention percentage excludes terminated employees from the past quarter, Malik explained calmly. When you include all departures, the actual rate is 72%. Grant stared down at the 19-year-old intern. I approved those figures yesterday. Yes, sir, but they don't include all the relevant data. Tyler stepped closer, his curiosity apparently piqued by the exchange. What kind of data? Malik turned his laptop so both executives could see the screen. 43 employee terminations that weren't counted in the retention analysis, most of them entry-level positions. Elena watched Tyler's face as he quickly scanned Malik's calculations. She saw the moment Tyler realized Malik was correct. A brief flicker of recognition followed by careful neutrality. Grant's jaw tightened. Those terminations were part of planned workforce optimization. They don't affect our core retention metrics. But they do affect the actual percentage of employees who remained with the company, Malik replied evenly. The conference room had gone completely quiet now. Other employees were pretending to focus on their own work, while obviously listening to the conversation. Grant's voice hardened. Your job is to prepare the materials I've requested, not to second-guess executive decisions. Malik met Grant's stare directly. My job is to prepare accurate information. Tyler cleared his throat softly. Elena noticed him glancing between Grant and Malik, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. The presentation is in 2 hours, Grant said. I need the retention analysis exactly as approved. Malik's response came quietly but clearly. I can't knowingly prepare misleading information for a board presentation. Grant's face flushed slightly. The CEO who commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors was being challenged by a summer intern barely old enough to vote. Then you don't work here anymore, Grant snapped. He turned toward the conference room entrance. Someone get Vanessa from HR up here right now. Elena felt her heart racing. She looked at Malik, who remained seated calmly, his hands still resting on his laptop keyboard. Tyler stood frozen, saying nothing. And Grant Halbrook had just fired the intern who refused to help him lie to his own board. Vanessa Price arrived at the executive conference room within minutes of Grant's call, her professional demeanor masking any curiosity about the urgent summons. She carried her tablet and wore the carefully neutral expression she had perfected during 7 years as Westbridge's chief people officer. You needed to see me immediately? Vanessa asked, her eyes moving between Grant's tense face and Malik, who remained standing beside his laptop. "We have a termination to process," Grant said curtly. "Effective immediately." Vanessa's gaze settled on Malik. She had reviewed his internship placement paperwork weeks earlier. A quiet, well-credentialed young man with strong academic references. She opened her tablet and accessed the HR system. "What's the official reason for termination?" Vanessa asked, stylus poised over the screen. Grant's answer came without hesitation. Insubordination. He refused a direct instruction from his supervisor. Elena stepped forward immediately. "Grant, that's not accurate. Malik has never received any disciplinary warnings during his entire placement here. His performance evaluations have been consistently excellent." Grant turned toward Elena with barely contained irritation. "Elena, this doesn't concern your department anymore." "It absolutely concerns my department," Elena replied firmly. "I'm his direct supervisor. I've documented his work quality every week since he started. He's been professional, punctual, and thorough in every assignment." Malik watched the exchange without speaking, his expression calm despite having his employment terminated minutes earlier. Tyler shifted uncomfortably beside Grant, clearly wanting to avoid involvement in what was becoming a heated discussion. "Elena, I'm ordering you to stay out of this," Grant said sharply. "Vanessa, enter insubordination as the cause for dismissal." Vanessa hesitated, glancing toward Elena. Company policy required supervisor input for any termination involving performance issues. Elena was clearly objecting to the characterization. "Insubordination requires prior warnings and progressive discipline," Elena said. "There's no documented history of behavioral problems." Grant's voice rose slightly. "There is now. He directly refused to follow instructions during a critical business meeting." Malik finally spoke, his tone respectful but direct. "Vanessa, could you please ensure the exact time and stated reason for my termination are entered into the HR system exactly as Mr. Halbrook has described?" Vanessa looked at him with surprise. Most terminated employees argued about their dismissal or demanded explanations. Malik seemed focused on accuracy rather than protest. "You want me to document this precisely?" Vanessa asked. "Yes, exactly as stated. Insubordination for refusing a direct instruction. Please include the timestamp." Vanessa entered the information into her tablet, the system automatically recording the date, time, and details. She read the entry back aloud. "Employee terminated for insubordination. Refused direct supervisor instruction. Entered at 10:47 a.m. "That's correct," Malik confirmed. Elena stared at Malik in bewilderment. Why wasn't he defending himself? Why wasn't he explaining that he had simply identified inaccurate information? Grant seemed equally puzzled by Malik's cooperative attitude, but satisfied with the outcome. "Good. Process his exit paperwork." Malik closed his laptop and gathered the few personal items from his workspace: a notebook, a pen, and a small water bottle. Someone from building services had provided a small cardboard box, which he used to collect his belongings. The entire packing process took less than 5 minutes. Malik had maintained a deliberately minimal presence during his internship, bringing only essential items to work each day. He removed his temporary access badge from his shirt pocket and placed it on the conference table. The plastic card made a small clicking sound against the polished wood surface. "That should complete the exit process," Malik said to Vanessa. Elena watched helplessly as Malik picked up his cardboard box. She wanted to say something, to apologize, to promise a reference letter, to somehow acknowledge the injustice of what had just occurred. Grant, Tyler, and Vanessa followed Malik toward the conference room exit, their conversation becoming lighter now that the unpleasant business was concluded. Tyler made a quiet comment that Elena couldn't hear completely, but she caught the word expected. Grant's response was clearer. Intelligence means nothing if you don't understand your place in the organization. Elena heard Vanessa's soft laugh as the group moved into the executive corridor. Malik walked ahead of them, carrying his small cardboard box with the same calm dignity he had maintained throughout the entire confrontation. The executive corridor stretched ahead of Malik like a polished marble runway. His footsteps echoed softly against the high ceiling as he carried the small cardboard box toward the bank of elevators at the far end. Behind him, Grant's voice carried clearly through the spacious hallway. "You see, that's the problem with hiring these smart college kids," Grant said, his tone conversational, but loud enough to ensure Malik could hear every word. "They think having a good GPA means they can walk into a real company and start making decisions." Tyler's laugh was sharp and knowing. "How long did he last? 3 weeks?" "Longer than I expected, honestly," Grant replied. "Most of them figure out the hierarchy faster than that." Malik continued walking at the same measured pace, his expression unchanged. The cardboard box felt light in his hands, containing so few personal items that it barely weighed anything at all. "The really dangerous ones are the ones who think they're smarter than everyone else," Grant continued, his voice gaining confidence as his audience of Tyler and Vanessa encouraged him. "They come in here thinking their fancy analysis skills matter more than understanding how businesses actually work." Vanessa's voice joined the conversation. "Future employers are going to see that insubordination record. HR departments talk to each other, especially in this industry. Word gets around about employees who cause problems." "Good," Grant said firmly. "Maybe it'll teach him something about respect that college apparently didn't." Tyler chuckled again. "Think he'll try to file a complaint with the labor board or something?" "Let him try," Grant answered dismissively. "We followed every procedure. Vanessa documented everything properly. He refused a direct instruction from his supervisor during a critical business meeting. Case closed." Malik reached the halfway point of the corridor, passing beneath one of the large windows that overlooked the city below. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, casting geometric shadows across the marble floor. The sad part is, he actually did have some analytical ability, Grant admitted with mock sympathy. If he'd kept his mouth shut and done what he was told, he might have learned something useful here. "Some people just can't handle working for successful people," Vanessa added. "They get intimidated by real leadership and start acting out." Grant's voice became more pointed. "Intelligence means absolutely nothing if you don't understand your place inside a company. Doesn't matter how smart you think you are. There's a chain of command, and everyone has to respect it." Malik stopped walking. He stood perfectly still for several seconds, about 20 feet from the elevator bank. The executives behind him continued their conversation, apparently not noticing he had halted his progress toward the exit. Without turning around, Malik reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. "Probably calling Mommy and Daddy to come pick him up," Tyler said quietly, but still loud enough for his voice to carry. Grant smiled. "Or maybe calling his college career counselor to complain about how unfair the corporate world is." Malik tapped the screen of his phone and lifted it to his ear. He waited while it rang twice before someone answered. "Rebecca," Malik said clearly. "It's Malik Carter." Grant, Tyler, and Vanessa were still talking among themselves, paying little attention to the one-sided phone conversation happening ahead of them. "Yes, I need to speak with you immediately," Malik continued in the same calm tone he had maintained throughout the entire morning. "Grant Halbrook just terminated my employment for refusing to alter employee retention figures in a board presentation." The executive's conversation began to quiet as they caught fragments of Malik's words. The figures excluded recently dismissed entry-level employees to make the retention percentage appear higher than it actually was. Malik explained to whoever was on the other end of the call. I told them the calculation was misleading. Grant fired me for insubordination. Grant's expression shifted slightly, though he continued to appear unconcerned. Who was this kid talking to? Some professor? A parent? A lawyer? Rebecca's voice on the phone was too quiet for anyone else to hear, but Malik nodded as she spoke. Yes, she entered it into the HR system, Malik confirmed. Terminated for insubordination at 10:47 a.m. Vanessa Price made the entry personally. There was a longer pause as Rebecca spoke. Grant exchanged a glance with Tyler. The phone call was lasting longer than expected, and Malik's tone remained surprisingly professional rather than emotional. The retention figures are still being prepared for this afternoon's presentation, Malik added. They were planning to present the misleading calculation to the board. Another pause. Malik listened carefully to whatever Rebecca was saying on the other end of the line. Finally, Malik turned around to face Grant, Tyler, and Vanessa directly. All three executives were now watching him with varying degrees of curiosity and mild concern. Malik looked straight at Grant while speaking into the phone. Fire every one of them. Grant burst out laughing. Grant's laughter echoed through the marble corridor, but it lasted only a few seconds before his phone began buzzing insistently. Tyler's phone started ringing at almost the same moment, then Vanessa's. Mr. Halbrook? Grant's assistant's voice came through his earpiece, sounding unusually tense. Rebecca Sloan needs to see you in the boardroom immediately. She said to bring Mr. Keene and Ms. Price with you. Grant frowned. Rebecca Sloan was Westbridge's independent board chair, but she rarely called emergency meetings during regular business hours. What's this about? She didn't say, sir, but she was very specific that no one should leave the building until after the meeting. Grant glanced at Tyler and Vanessa, who were both finishing their own similar phone calls. Tyler's expression had shifted from amusement to concern, while Vanessa looked confused. She wants all three of us? Tyler asked quietly. Grant nodded, then looked toward Malik, who was still standing by the elevator with his cardboard box and his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, Malik was saying into the phone, they're all still here. Grant, Tyler, and Vanessa. Grant's stomach tightened slightly. The timing was too coincidental to ignore. Mr. Carter? Rebecca's assistant appeared at the far end of the corridor, walking quickly toward them. Ms. Sloan would like you to join the meeting as well. Malik ended his phone call and slipped the device back into his jacket pocket. Of course. Grant watched as the young man he had just fired walked calmly toward the executive conference room, still carrying the box containing his personal belongings. Something about Malik's demeanor had changed subtly, not defiant or angry, but somehow more focused. The boardroom was Westbridge's most impressive space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a polished mahogany table that could seat 20 people. Rebecca Sloan stood at the head of the table, her silver hair perfectly arranged and her expression unreadable. Rebecca was in her early 60s, with the kind of composed authority that came from decades of corporate governance experience. She had been Westbridge's independent board chair for 3 years, brought in specifically to provide oversight during the company's financial difficulties. Please, everyone take a seat, Rebecca said as the group entered. Grant chose his usual position near the head of the table, with Tyler and Vanessa flanking him. Malik remained standing, still holding his cardboard box. Grant, Rebecca began without preamble, I need you to confirm something for the record. Did you personally authorize the termination of Malik Carter's employment this morning? Grant straightened in his chair. The question seemed oddly formal, but he had nothing to hide. Yes, I did. The intern refused to follow instructions during a critical business meeting. He was insubordinate. And what specifically did he refuse to do? Rebecca asked. He refused to prepare presentation materials as directed, Grant answered confidently. When I told him to finalize the employee retention figures for today's board presentation, he argued with me about the calculations instead of completing the task. Rebecca made a note on the pad in front of her. So you terminated his employment for questioning the accuracy of information being prepared for board review? Tyler shifted uncomfortably. The way Rebecca phrased the question made Grant's decision sound more problematic than it actually was. He was terminated for insubordination, Grant clarified firmly. I don't tolerate employees who challenge their supervisor's authority. Thank you for confirming that, Rebecca said. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick document bound in blue covers. She placed it on the table where everyone could see the cover page. Westbridge Technologies, Recapitalization Agreement, Carter Strategic Ventures, $150,000. Grant's breath caught. He recognized the investor's name immediately. Carter Strategic Ventures was the private investment firm that had signed the binding agreement to inject desperately needed capital into Westbridge. Without that financing, the company would face severe operational challenges within months. This is the executed investment agreement that will close later today, Rebecca explained. Carter Strategic Ventures has committed to invest $150 million into Westbridge Technologies. Tyler leaned forward to examine the document more closely. His face had gone pale. I'm familiar with this transaction, Grant said carefully, but I'm not sure why we're discussing it in relation to a personnel matter. Rebecca looked directly at Malik, who was still standing beside his chair. Would you like to explain your connection to Carter Strategic Ventures, Mr. Carter? Malik set his cardboard box on the floor beside one of the leather chairs, then looked across the table at Grant. Carter Strategic Ventures is my company, Malik said simply. I'm the sole controlling owner. The room fell completely silent. Grant stared at the 19-year-old he had just fired. That's impossible. The investment agreement includes provisions allowing the beneficial owner to conduct operational due diligence before closing, Rebecca continued. Mr. Carter requested permission to work temporarily inside Westbridge as an ordinary intern. The independent board approved his placement 3 weeks ago. Tyler's hands were trembling slightly as he flipped through pages of the agreement. The voting structure. Once the investment closes, Carter Strategic Ventures will hold 51% voting control of Westbridge Technologies, Rebecca confirmed. The existing dual-class founder shares will convert to ordinary voting shares. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. She was staring at the HR termination record on her phone screen, the one she had proudly entered into the system less than an hour earlier. Grant's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. The intern he had dismissed for insubordination was actually the investor whose money was keeping Westbridge alive. The teenager he had humiliated in front of other executives was about to become the company's controlling shareholder. Malik pulled out the leather chair and sat down directly across from Grant. His cardboard box remained on the floor beside him. Now we can discuss why you fired me. Grant's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a deep shade of red as the reality of Malik's identity settled in. The CEO, who had confidently dismissed a teenager for insubordination, was now staring at the person whose investment could make or break his company. This is some kind of joke, Grant said, his voice strained. You're telling me this kid owns a $150 million investment firm? Carter Strategic Ventures has provided all required documentation and financial verification, Rebecca replied calmly. The investment agreement was executed following proper due diligence and board approval. Malik leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanged. The joke was thinking you could fire me for refusing to help you mislead investors with false retention numbers. Tyler frantically flipped through more pages of the agreement, searching for something that might explain this impossible situation. "How old are you?" 19, Malik answered. "That's absurd," Grant snapped. "No 19-year-old controls that kind of money." "I built and sold a logistics software company when I was 18, Malik said matter-of-factly. "Used part of the proceeds to form Carter Strategic. Your company applied for investment. We agreed to terms." Vanessa was staring at her phone screen where Malik's termination record still displayed. She had entered insubordination as the reason for firing Westbridge's incoming majority shareholder. Grant pushed his chair back from the table. "Even if this is true, it doesn't change what happened today. You refused to follow instructions during a business meeting. I refuse to alter accurate data to make your employee retention numbers look better than they actually are," Malik corrected. "Those same numbers were being prepared for presentation to Carter Strategic Ventures." The implications hit Tyler immediately. "You're saying Grant fired you for refusing to help present misleading information to your own investment company?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Rebecca made another note on her pad. "Mr. Carter, what are you proposing we do about this situation?" Malik looked directly at Grant, then at Tyler, then at Vanessa. "I'm not putting $150 million under executives who retaliate against employees for reporting accurate information. Fire all 3 of them." Grant shot to his feet. "Now wait just a minute." "You had your chance to wait," Malik interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying an edge. "You chose to fire me instead of checking whether I was right about the numbers." Rebecca raised her hand for silence. "Mr. Carter, I understand your concerns, but corporate governance cannot become personal revenge. If you're alleging misconduct by senior executives, we need to follow proper procedures." "What kind of procedures?" Malik asked. "A formal investigation, documentation review, witness interviews. The board cannot terminate executives for cause without establishing clear grounds that would survive legal scrutiny." Tyler saw his opening. "Actually, I think we need to examine whether Mr. Carter violated the investment agreement by concealing his identity from management." "How?" Rebecca asked. "The agreement includes good faith provisions. Malik deliberately infiltrated this company under false pretenses. He obtained confidential operational information while pretending to be an ordinary intern." Grant's confidence began returning. "That's right. He lied about who he was." "I never lied about anything," Malik said calmly. "I applied for the internship under my real name using my actual qualifications. The company hired me through its standard process." "But you didn't disclose that you owned Carter Strategic Ventures," Tyler pressed. Rebecca consulted the agreement. The confidential board attachment explicitly authorizes the beneficial owner to conduct operational observation without disclosing his investment identity to management. Mr. Carter followed the approved protocol. Tyler's argument crumbled, but he wasn't finished. "Then what about his performance issues?" Everyone turned to look at him. "What performance issues?" Rebecca asked. Vanessa suddenly straightened in her chair. "Actually, I've been meaning to address some concerns about Malik's attitude during his placement. He's been argumentative and difficult to manage." Malik stared at her. "That's completely false." "I have documentation," Vanessa said, looking at her phone. "Previous warnings about insubordination." "Show us," Rebecca said. Vanessa hesitated. "The records are in my office. I'll need to retrieve them." "We can wait," Malik said quietly. Grant watched this exchange with growing hope. if Tyler could find problems with the investment agreement, or if Vanessa could document previous issues with Malik's behavior, they might be able to turn this situation around. Rebecca checked her watch. It's already past 6 o'clock. The investment isn't scheduled to close until tomorrow afternoon anyway. I suggest we reconvene in the morning to review all documentation and determine the appropriate course of action. Agreed, Tyler said quickly. Grant stood up, his composure returning. Before we adjourn, I want something clearly understood. He looked directly at Malik. Your investment agreement may be signed, but it hasn't closed yet. Until your money actually lands in our accounts tomorrow, the existing voting structure remains in place. Meaning? Malik asked. Meaning I still hold enhanced voting rights as founder and CEO, and I'm still in control of this company. Grant's voice carried the same authority he had used when firing Malik earlier. Until your money lands tomorrow, this is still my company. Tyler nodded in agreement. The current management structure remains unchanged until closing. Vanessa gathered her papers, her confidence returning now that she had time to prepare her documentation. Malik remained seated as the others began to leave. He looked at his cardboard box, still sitting on the floor beside his chair. Rebecca was the last to head for the door. We'll reconvene at 9 tomorrow morning. Grant paused in the doorway and turned back toward Malik. You may have caught us off guard today, kid, but you just gave us 18 hours to figure out how to protect this company from a teenager who thinks money makes him qualified to run a business. The door closed behind them, leaving Malik alone in the boardroom with his cardboard box and the investment agreement that would either make him Westbridge's controlling shareholder or cost him $150 million. The next morning, Malik arrived at Westbridge Technologies 30 minutes before the scheduled 9 o'clock meeting. He wore the same jeans and white shirt from yesterday, carrying a simple leather portfolio instead of the cardboard box that had marked his humiliation. Rebecca met him in the lobby. "How are you feeling?" "Ready," Malik said simply. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened on the executive floor, they could hear voices coming from the main conference room. Far more voices than should have been present for a board meeting. "What's happening?" Malik asked. Rebecca frowned. "I don't know. The review was scheduled for the boardroom, not the general conference facility." They walked toward the sounds and found nearly 60 employees packed into Westbridge's largest meeting space. Grant stood at the front with a wireless microphone, flanked by Tyler and Vanessa. A presentation screen displayed the company logo behind him. Grant noticed Rebecca and Malik entering through the back doors. "Ah, perfect timing. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Malik Carter." Heads turned. Employees who had worked alongside Malik during his internship looked confused. Others had never seen him before. "Yesterday afternoon," Grant continued, "this young man made some very serious accusations against the leadership team. He's threatened to withdraw a critical investment that could determine whether this company survives the next 12 months. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Malik saw worry spreading across faces, people who depended on their paychecks, who had families to support. "Now, I want everyone to understand what's really happening here," Grant said, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had addressed employees for decades. "Mr. Carter is 19 years old. He's very wealthy. And apparently he believes that because his internship ended on a difficult note, he should be able to dictate how this company operates." Tyler stepped forward. "The investment we've been counting on, the $150 million that would recapitalize our operations and secure everyone's jobs, is now in jeopardy because of personal grievances." Vanessa added, "We're talking about nearly 800 jobs, 800 families who could lose their livelihoods because a teenager didn't like being held accountable for his performance." Malik watched employees' expressions shift from confusion to fear to anger. Grant was systematically turning the entire workforce against him by framing the conflict as a spoiled rich kid threatening their security. "The question you should all be asking," Grant continued, "is whether this company should be held hostage by someone who thinks money gives him the right to destroy what we've built together." An operations manager Malik recognized raised her hand. "Are we really going to lose the financing?" "That depends," Grant said, looking directly at Malik, "on whether Mr. Carter decides to put his personal feelings ahead of everyone else's welfare." Malik had heard enough. He stepped forward. "May I respond to that?" Grant smiled coldly. "I think we've heard enough from you already." "Actually," Rebecca's voice cut through the tension, "as independent board chair, I believe Mr. Carter has the right to address the employees directly." "This isn't a board meeting," Grant said. "This is an employee briefing that I'm conducting as CEO. About an investment matter that falls under board oversight," Rebecca replied firmly. "Give him the microphone." Grant's jaw tightened. He understood that refusing would make him appear afraid of what Malik might say. "Fine, but keep it brief." He handed over the wireless microphone with obvious reluctance. Malik took it and looked out at the assembled employees. Some faces were hostile. Others appeared curious. Many just looked scared. "First," Malik said, his voice calm and clear, "Carter Strategic Ventures' investment commitment remains unchanged. The $150 million is still available." Relief flickered across several faces. "Second, my dispute isn't with any of you. It's with leadership practices that I witnessed during my time here. When employees report accurate information that contradicts what executives want to hear, they shouldn't face retaliation." He paused, making eye contact with Elena, who was standing near the middle of the group. "The financing isn't threatened because employees spoke up. It's here because employees deserve leadership that supports them, rather than punishing them for doing their jobs correctly." Grant's smile had disappeared entirely. Malik continued, "Carter Strategic will honor our signed agreement as long as Westbridge honors its commitments to operate with proper governance and employee protection. Your jobs are safe. The investment is secure." He handed the microphone back to Grant. "The only question is whether leadership will accept accountability for its actions." Rebecca stepped forward before Grant could respond. "Given the serious nature of the allegations under review, I'm implementing interim protective measures effective immediately." Grant's eyes narrowed. "What kind of measures?" "Until the investigation concludes, no employee may be terminated, demoted, or disciplined without written approval from the independent board. Any personnel actions must be submitted with documented justification 48 hours in advance." The conference room fell silent. Everyone understood what had just happened. Grant's authority to hire and fire at will had been suspended. Tyler spoke carefully. "Rebecca, that's an extraordinary restriction on normal management operations." "It's a necessary protection given the circumstances," she replied. "The restriction applies to all senior executives until further notice." Grant stared at her, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. For the first time in Westbridge's history, his personnel authority had been publicly limited in front of the entire workforce. Malik said nothing, but employees noticed the shift in dynamics. The teenager who had been fired yesterday was still standing in the room, while the CEO who had fired him was now operating under restrictions. "Meeting adjourned," Grant said curtly. "Everyone back to work." As employees filed out, Malik could hear whispered conversations. The narrative Grant had tried to establish, wealthy teenager threatening their jobs, had been complicated by Malik's direct response and Rebecca's immediate action. Grant approached Rebecca as the room emptied. "This is still my company?" "Until the review concludes," Rebecca said evenly. "It's a company operating under enhanced oversight." Grant looked at Malik one more time before leaving the conference room. His confident demeanor from yesterday had cracked, but his eyes carried a new determination. The first visible consequence had been imposed. Grant's absolute authority was no longer absolute. But Malik knew this was just the beginning of Grant's counterattack. Vanessa hurried back to her office, her heels clicking against the polished floor with urgent precision. The employee meeting had been a disaster. Grant's attempt to turn the workforce against Malik had backfired spectacularly, and now they were operating under board restrictions that made her stomach clench with anxiety. She needed to find something, anything. Vanessa unlocked her computer and pulled up Malik's personnel file. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she scrolled through his records. Employment application, background check results, direct supervisor evaluations. Everything looked clean, too clean. Elena's performance reviews were thorough and consistently positive. Exceptional analytical ability. Professional demeanor under pressure. Demonstrates strong attention to detail. Recommended for continued placement. Vanessa's jaw tightened as she read Elena's final summary. Malik consistently exceeds expectations and would be an asset to any permanent role within the organization. There was nothing here that supported Grant's termination decision. Nothing that suggested Malik had been difficult or insubordinate prior to yesterday's incident. But there could be. Vanessa opened the disciplinary action module and created a new entry. She backdated it to 2 weeks earlier and typed carefully, "Employee counseled regarding inappropriate challenges to management decisions during team meetings. Advised that questioning supervisory direction in front of other staff members is unprofessional and disruptive to workplace hierarchy. Employee acknowledged the feedback and agreed to direct future concerns through proper channels." She reviewed the entry twice, making sure the language sounded appropriately bureaucratic. Nothing too dramatic that would seem obviously fabricated. Just enough to establish a pattern of the behavior Grant had cited. Vanessa saved the document and leaned back in her chair. The HR system would show that Malik had received prior guidance about his attitude. When the board reviewed his termination, they would see documented evidence that yesterday's insubordination wasn't an isolated incident. She closed the file and moved on to other pressing matters, confident that she had provided Grant with the supporting documentation he needed. 20 minutes later, Elena's phone buzzed with an automated notification. Personnel file update. Malik Carter. Disciplinary action added. Elena frowned at the message. She was Malik's direct supervisor. Any disciplinary action should have been discussed with her first, especially since she had just defended his performance record in front of the entire executive team. She opened the updated file and read the new entry. Her confusion turned to anger as she realized what she was looking at. The warning claimed Malik had been counseled about challenging management decisions during team meetings. Elena had attended every meeting where Malik was present. No such conversation had ever occurred. More importantly, the behavior described in the warning directly contradicted her own written evaluations. She had specifically praised Malik for his professional approach to raising concerns through appropriate channels. Elena immediately pulled up the original version of Malik's file from her own records. The disciplinary section had been completely empty when she had last accessed it yesterday morning. Someone had created this warning after Malik was already fired. Elena grabbed her laptop and headed straight for Rebecca's office. She found Malik there, reviewing investment documents with the board chair. "We have a problem," Elena said, closing the door behind her. "Someone has altered Malik's personnel file." Rebecca looked up sharply. "What kind of alteration?" "A disciplinary warning that didn't exist yesterday." Elena opened her laptop and displayed both versions side by side. The original file shows no warnings. The current version shows a counseling session that never happened. Malik studied the screen without apparent surprise. When was the warning supposedly created? 2 weeks ago, Elena replied. But the system shows it was actually entered this morning at 9:47 a.m., about 20 minutes after our employee meeting ended. Rebecca's expression darkened. Who has the authority to add disciplinary actions to personnel files? Vanessa, as Chief People Officer, and technically Grant, but he would need Vanessa's login credentials. The warning describes behavior that directly contradicts your written evaluations, Rebecca observed. Completely, Elena said firmly. I specifically noted that Malik raised concerns through proper channels. The incident described in this warning never occurred. I was present at every meeting Malik attended. Rebecca stood and walked to her phone. I'm calling an immediate review session. Elena, I need you to document everything you just showed us. Malik, do you want Vanessa confronted directly or through formal process? Formal process, Malik said quietly. I want everything examined properly. An hour later, they sat in the small conference room with Vanessa across from them. Rebecca had printed both versions of Malik's file and placed them on the table. Vanessa, can you explain this disciplinary entry that was added to Malik's file this morning? Vanessa glanced at the documents, her face carefully composed. I was documenting a verbal counseling session that had occurred previously. Sometimes we fall behind on paperwork during busy periods. What specifically prompted this counseling session? Rebecca asked. Malik had questioned management decisions in front of other employees. I felt it was important to address the behavior before it became a pattern. Elena leaned forward. Vanessa, I was Malik's direct supervisor. When did this conversation occur? Approximately 2 weeks ago, as documented. I was present at every meeting Malik attended, Elena said evenly. No such conversation occurred. Furthermore, my evaluation specifically praised his professional approach to raising concerns. Vanessa's composure flickered slightly. It may have been a private conversation that you weren't present for. Then why wasn't I informed as his supervisor? Elena pressed. Company policy requires supervisory notification of all disciplinary actions. Rebecca intervened. Vanessa, the system logs show this entry was created at 9:47 a.m. today, approximately 20 minutes after this morning's employee meeting concluded. Can you explain that timing? Vanessa hesitated. As I said, I was catching up on documentation. The actual conversation occurred weeks ago. But you chose to document it immediately after a meeting where Malik's employment record was discussed. The timing is coincidental. Rebecca made notes on her legal pad. Elena, do you have any record of Malik exhibiting the behavior described in this warning? None whatsoever. His conduct has been consistently professional. Rebecca closed her portfolio. Vanessa, given the discrepancies between this entry and the documented timeline, I'm temporarily suspending your access to the HR management system pending investigation. Vanessa's careful composure finally cracked. Rebecca, you're overreacting to a simple documentation issue. Creating disciplinary records after an employee's termination isn't a documentation issue. It's potential evidence manipulation. Through the conference room's glass wall, Grant watched as Vanessa handed over her system access card. His face remained impassive, but Malik could see the calculation behind his eyes. Grant's attempt to strengthen the firing had instead created clear evidence of retaliation. Tyler Keene had watched Vanessa's failure unfold from his office window. He saw her hand over the system access card. He saw Grant's jaw tighten with barely controlled anger. And he saw Rebecca make careful notes in her legal portfolio. Vanessa had tried to fight with altered records and gotten caught immediately. Amateur hour. Tyler understood something the others didn't. This battle wouldn't be won in HR systems or employee files. It would be won in contracts and corporate law. places where Tyler had spent 15 years becoming an expert. He returned to his office and pulled out the Carter Strategic Investment Agreement. Not the summary version everyone had seen. The complete document with all attachments and representations. Tyler had been studying it since Rebecca's revelation about Malik's identity. There had to be something. Some clause, some requirement, some vulnerability. Tyler found it on page 47. The good faith dealing provision required both parties to act honestly and fairly throughout the investment process. It specifically prohibited material omissions or misrepresentations that could affect the other party's decision-making. Tyler smiled for the first time since yesterday's disaster. He spent the next 2 hours crafting a legal memorandum. Not the sloppy documentation Vanessa had attempted. A proper legal analysis that could withstand scrutiny. By 11 a.m., Tyler was ready. He requested an immediate meeting with Grant and Rebecca. Both arrived within minutes, though their expressions suggested very different expectations. "I've identified a contractual issue that could invalidate Carter Strategic's investment," Tyler announced, placing copies of his memorandum on the table. Grant leaned forward immediately. "What kind of issue?" Malik concealed his identity throughout the entire internship process. He observed confidential operations, attended management meetings, and accessed internal information while hiding the fact that he controlled our incoming investment partner. Rebecca frowned. "Tyler, the board was informed." "The board may have been informed," Tyler interrupted smoothly. "But management wasn't, and the investment agreement requires good faith dealing between the parties. Material omissions violate that standard." Grant's confidence began returning. "You're saying the kid lied to us?" "I'm saying he concealed information that would have materially affected how management interacted with him. That concealment arguably violates the good faith provisions of our agreement." Tyler opened his memorandum to the key section. "If we can demonstrate bad faith, we can challenge the investment before it closes. Without that $150 million, Malik has no leverage." "How strong is the argument?" Grant asked. "Strong enough to delay closing while we litigate. And delay benefits us. Every day Malik doesn't control the company is another day for us to strengthen our position." Rebecca had been reading Tyler's analysis in silence. Her expression remained neutral, but Tyler detected something that worried him. She didn't look surprised. "Tyler, this is an interesting theory," Rebecca said carefully, "but there's something you haven't seen." She reached into her briefcase and produced a document Tyler had never encountered. "Confidential Board Resolution 2024-08, executed 3 weeks ago." Grant looked confused. "What resolution?" Rebecca placed the document on the table where both men could read it. Tyler's confidence began dissolving as he scanned the first paragraph. The resolution explicitly authorized the beneficial owner of Carter Strategic Ventures to conduct temporary operational observation within Westbridge Technologies without requiring disclosure of investment identity to operational management. "The board approved his placement before he ever walked through our doors," Rebecca continued. "Malik Carter applied for internship under his real name. He passed our standard background checks. He never claimed to be anyone else." Tyler's memorandum suddenly felt worthless in his hands. "Furthermore," Rebecca added, "the resolution specifically states that this operational observation period would allow the investor to evaluate company culture and management practices before finalizing the capital commitment." Grant stared at the authorization. "You're telling me the board knew who he was the entire time?" "The independent board knew. Management didn't need to know because the investment agreement was already binding." Tyler tried one final argument. "But surely management had a right to know we were being observed." "By whom?" Rebecca interrupted. "Malik Carter submitted legitimate credentials and performed legitimate work. The fact that he also happened to control our investment partner doesn't change his internship status. Tyler realized his contractual attack had failed completely. Worse than failed. It had revealed that he didn't understand the full scope of what the board had approved. Malik had been sitting quietly throughout the entire exchange. Now he spoke for the first time. "Tyler, you said my presence affected how management interacted with me. How exactly should management treat interns differently if they have money?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tyler had no good answer, because any honest response would acknowledge that management treated wealthy people differently than employees. And that acknowledgement would prove Malik's point about abuse of power. Grant's hands clenched into fists on the conference table. First, Vanessa's amateur hour documentation fraud. Now, Tyler's sophisticated legal theory had collapsed just as quickly. But as Tyler gathered his worthless memorandum, Grant's expression shifted from frustration to something more dangerous. He couldn't challenge Malik's money. He couldn't invalidate Malik's internship. But he could destroy the credibility of everyone who supported the teenager. Grant's office felt smaller when he was angry. The mahogany desk that usually projected authority now seemed like a barrier between him and the problem he couldn't solve through normal channels. Elena knocked on the doorframe at exactly 11:30. "You wanted to see me? Close the door. Have a seat." Elena settled into the leather chair across from Grant's desk. She had worked for Westbridge for 8 years and had never been called to a private meeting with the CEO. The formality made her nervous. Grant opened a manila folder and removed a single sheet of paper. He placed it on the desk between them, turning it so Elena could read clearly. "Your evaluation of Malik Carter." Elena recognized her own handwriting immediately. The form contained her standard assessment language, but the comments were unusually positive for a summer intern. Exceptional analytical ability, professional demeanor under pressure, proactive problem-solving approach, recommended for continued placement. "I remember this," Elena said carefully. "Malik was one of the strongest interns I've supervised. That's what we need to discuss." Grant leaned back in his executive chair, adopting the tone he used when explaining complex situations to junior employees. "Elena, the board is conducting a formal review of recent events. Your evaluation carries significant weight because you worked with Malik directly before anyone knew his background." Elena nodded. She understood the evaluation would be examined, and she stood behind every word. "The problem," Grant continued, "is that your assessment doesn't align with what actually happened in that boardroom. Malik challenged my presentation in front of executives. He refused direct orders. He demonstrated exactly the kind of insubordination that creates workplace problems. Mr. Halbrook, Malik was reporting accurate information." Grant raised his hand to stop her. "I'm not asking you to invent anything dramatic, but your evaluation needs to reflect the complete picture. Someone who argues with leadership, someone who has difficulty accepting authority, someone whose attitude creates friction." Elena stared at the evaluation form. Grant wasn't asking her to lie outright. He was asking her to reinterpret Malik's behavior through a different lens. "You want me to change what I wrote? I want you to be more complete in your assessment. Analytical could become argumentative. Professional under pressure might be resistant to feedback. These are just different ways of describing the same behaviors." Elena's stomach tightened. She had written those comments after observing Malik for 3 weeks. He hadn't been argumentative. He had been thoughtful. He hadn't resisted feedback. He had asked intelligent questions. "I can't do that." Grant's expression hardened. "You can't do what, exactly?" "I can't change an accurate evaluation to make it say something that isn't true. Elena, let me be very clear about something. I am still the CEO of this company. The board review will conclude, and when it does, I'll still be responsible for making personnel decisions, including decisions about managers who demonstrate poor judgment during difficult situations. The threat hung in the air without being stated directly. Elena understood perfectly. Are you saying my job depends on changing this evaluation? I'm saying your career depends on understanding the bigger picture. Malik Carter may have money, but money doesn't automatically make someone right. Sometimes loyalty to the company means protecting it from people who threaten stability. Elena looked at the evaluation again. Every word remained accurate. Malik had been exceptional. Changing that assessment would mean admitting she couldn't trust her own professional judgment. I won't revise it. Grant's jaw tightened. Then you're making a serious mistake. Elena pulled out her phone. What are you doing? Requesting independent protection. This conversation just became retaliation. She typed quickly, "Need immediate assistance in CEO office regarding evaluation pressure." Grant stood from his chair. "Put that phone away. We're having a private discussion about performance standards. We're having a discussion about falsifying records." The office door opened before Grant could respond. Rebecca Sloan entered with Malik immediately behind her. "Elena requested our presence," Rebecca said calmly. "What seems to be the issue?" Grant forced his voice back to professional levels. "We were reviewing Malik's internship evaluation for completeness." Rebecca approached the desk and examined the evaluation form. Her eyes moved from Elena's original comments to Grant's face. "This evaluation appears complete to me. What additional information were you seeking?" Grant realized his position had become impossible to defend openly. "I was simply suggesting that Elena might want to expand her observations." Malik spoke for the first time since entering the office. "What kind of expansion?" "Nothing specific. Just a more thorough analysis of your interpersonal approach." Elena found her courage returning with witnesses present. "Mr. Halbrook asked me to describe Malik as argumentative and difficult with authority. I refused because those descriptions are inaccurate." Rebecca's expression remained neutral, but she made a note on her tablet. "Grant, requesting altered evaluations from supervisors constitutes witness tampering." "I didn't request anything altered." "You asked me to change analytical to argumentative," Elena interrupted. "Those were your exact words." Grant's face flushed red. Another attempt at controlling the narrative had collapsed in real time. Malik turned to Rebecca. "Every employee cooperating with this investigation needs written anti-retaliation protection, immediately." Rebecca nodded. "I'll draft the protection order this afternoon." "No," Malik said firmly. "Right now, before anyone leaves this office." Rebecca opened her tablet and began typing. Within minutes, she had created a formal anti-retaliation directive. She sent it to Elena's email and copied the board. "Done. Elena, you now have official protection against any adverse action related to your cooperation with the board review." Grant stared at his desk. He had summoned Elena to pressure her into altering Malik's record. Instead, he had generated another piece of evidence against himself, while creating formal protections for employees who might testify against him. Malik looked directly at Grant. "Rules aren't here to protect me from you. They're here to protect everyone who doesn't have $150 million. Grant's hands clenched into fists. Every move he made to regain control resulted in new restrictions on his authority. He was still CEO, but he was beginning to understand that CEO might not be enough. Grant waited until Elena and Rebecca had left before approaching Malik directly. "I'd like to speak with you privately before the board review begins." Malik looked up from the documents he was organizing. About what? About finding a solution that works for everyone. Malik closed the folder in front of him. What kind of solution? Grant moved to the chair across from Malik's position at the conference table. His entire demeanor had shifted from confrontational to conciliatory. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. The termination was hasty. I was under pressure from multiple directions, and I reacted poorly to what I perceived as insubordination. Malik remained silent. Here's what I'm prepared to do, Grant continued. I'll publicly announce that the entire incident was a misunderstanding. Your termination gets erased from all company records. Vanessa will remove every reference to disciplinary action from your file. Grant leaned forward slightly. More than that, I want to offer you a formal position as strategic advisor, paid position, direct access to executive meetings, real influence over company direction. In exchange for what? In exchange for understanding that Westbridge needs continuity right now. Your investment is crucial, but so is experienced leadership. I'm asking you to stop demanding my removal and allow me to remain CEO after your transaction closes. Malik studied Grant's face carefully. The older man's expression showed none of his earlier arrogance. This was Grant attempting charm instead of intimidation. You think this is about me being embarrassed? I think you're a smart young man who got treated unfairly and wants to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's reasonable. But destroying careers over a single incident isn't proportional. Malik shook his head slowly. You still don't understand what happened. Then explain it to me. You didn't fire me because you were under pressure. You fired me because I wouldn't help you mislead investors. When I refused to alter accurate information, you decided I was disposable. Grant's conciliatory tone wavered slightly. The workforce figures were a minor presentation issue. The workforce figures were sent to Carter Strategic as part of your investment certification. You fired your incoming majority shareholder for refusing to help you provide false information to his own investment company. Grant fell silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried less warmth. Fine, maybe my judgment was flawed in that specific instance. But removing me entirely is an overreaction. I've built this company from nothing. I know every aspect of the business, every key relationship, every operational challenge. And I know what you do when employees try to protect the company from bad decisions. Grant's facade of reasonableness began cracking. Malik, let me be direct about something. Several directors are deeply uncomfortable with the idea of giving controlling influence to a 19-year-old investor, regardless of how much money you have. Malik's expression didn't change. Age matters in business, Grant continued. Experience matters. Relationships matter. Board members who've worked in this industry for decades are nervous about putting effective control in the hands of someone who could be their grandson. Are you saying they won't vote for my position? I'm saying they have legitimate concerns about corporate governance and leadership continuity, and I intend to make sure those concerns are heard clearly during the review process. Grant's strategy was now completely visible. He planned to use Malik's youth as evidence of poor judgment, while positioning himself as the stable, experienced alternative. You think they'll choose you over me because I'm 19? I think they'll choose proven leadership over potential leadership. I think they'll choose someone who understands that running a company requires more than financial resources. Malik stood from his chair. Then they'll have all the evidence they need to make that choice. What evidence? Yours, mine, Elena's evaluations, Vanessa's altered records, Tyler's contradictory statements, Rebecca's investigation findings, everything that actually happened. Grant stood as well, his conciliatory approach completely abandoned. Evidence can be interpreted different ways, Malik. The same facts that make you look principled could make you look naive. The same decisions that make me appear heavy-handed could make me appear decisive. We'll find out. Yes, we will. Grant moved toward the door, then stopped. Let me leave you with something to consider. People will forgive an arrogant CEO before they trust a teenager with their company. Arrogance they understand. Youth with power makes them nervous. Malik gathered his documents. Then we'll see which matters more to them. Grant opened the door to the boardroom where Rebecca was already arranging materials for the formal review. Other directors were beginning to arrive for what everyone knew would determine the future leadership of Westbridge Technologies. Both men walked toward the conference table where Malik's $150 million investment and Grant's 30-year career would finally be measured against each other. The boardroom felt different this afternoon. The polished conference table that had witnessed countless routine meetings now served as the stage for a formal corporate review. Rebecca sat at the head of the table with a stack of documents arranged precisely in front of her. Malik took the seat to her right, while Grant, Tyler, and Vanessa occupied chairs across from him. Elena sat slightly apart from the executives, her own folder containing Malik's performance records. Rebecca called the session to order. This review will examine the circumstances surrounding the termination of Malik Carter from his internship position. All statements made here are being recorded and will become part of the official corporate record. Vanessa straightened her shoulders and spoke first. If I may address the fundamental issue, Chairwoman Sloan, the Chief Executive Officer possesses clear authority under company policy to dismiss any employee, including interns, for performance or conduct reasons. Mr. Carter's termination falls well within established management discretion. Several directors nodded slightly. The argument sounded reasonable and procedurally correct. Malik looked directly at Vanessa. I agree completely. The room fell silent. Everyone had expected Malik to challenge Grant's authority to fire him. Instead, he had just confirmed it. Rebecca leaned forward. Mr. Carter, are you conceding that your termination was within policy? I'm confirming that CEOs can fire interns. What I want to understand is why this CEO fired this intern. Grant's confident expression wavered slightly. He had prepared to defend his managerial authority, not his specific reasoning. Malik turned toward Elena. Ms. Brooks, would you please share my performance evaluations with the board? Elena opened her folder and distributed copies of Malik's internship records. The documents showed consistent ratings of exceeds expectations across every category. The written comments praised his analytical abilities, professional demeanor, and reliability. These evaluations cover my entire time at Westbridge, Malik explained. No disciplinary warnings, no performance concerns, no complaints about attitude or cooperation. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Performance reviews don't capture every workplace interaction. Ms. Price, Malik interrupted, looking at Vanessa. When you processed my termination, what reason did you enter into the HR system? Vanessa glanced at Grant before answering. Insubordination. Rebecca produced a printed timestamp report. According to company records, that entry was made at 11:47 a.m. on the day in question. Ms. Brooks, when did the meeting occur where Mr. Carter allegedly displayed insubordination? Elena checked her notes. The workforce presentation meeting began at 11:15 a.m. Malik was escorted from the building by 11:45 a.m. So the insubordination entry was created after Mr. Carter had already been fired and removed from the premises? Vanessa's face flushed. The entry reflected conduct that occurred during the meeting. What specific conduct? Malik asked quietly. Grant finally spoke. You questioned my presentation materials in front of other employees. You refused to make corrections when directed. You challenged my authority as CEO. Malik nodded. I did question presentation materials. Specifically, the workforce retention figures you wanted included in the board presentation. He pulled out a printed spreadsheet and placed it on the table. This is the document I was asked to revise. The highlighted cells show employee terminations that were excluded from retention calculations. Including those terminations reduces the reported retention rate from 87% to 71%. Elena examined the spreadsheet. These numbers are accurate. Malik identified a calculation error that would have significantly overstated our retention performance. Tyler attempted to minimize the discrepancy. Retention methodology can vary depending on which employee categories you include. This appears to be a minor disagreement about technical definitions. Malik looked directly at Tyler. Were these same retention figures included in the quarterly certification materials sent to Carter Strategic Ventures before the investment agreement was signed? The question landed like a physical blow. Tyler's face went pale as he realized where Malik was leading the inquiry. Rebecca leaned forward. "Mr. Keene, please answer the question." Tyler hesitated for several seconds. Yes, those figures were included in investor materials. The atmosphere in the room shifted completely. What had appeared to be an internal workplace disagreement suddenly became something far more serious. "So, when I refused to alter the retention calculation," Malik continued, "I was refusing to help create materials that would misrepresent workforce stability to the company's incoming major investor?" Grant tried to interrupt. "The figures were prepared in good faith, based on standard—" "Mr. Holbrook," Rebecca said firmly, "Mr. Carter has the floor." Malik remained calm. "I wasn't fired for poor performance. I wasn't fired for being disrespectful. I was fired because I wouldn't help present misleading information about employee retention to Carter Strategic Ventures, the same company that was preparing to invest $150 million based partly on workforce stability representations." Vanessa attempted to defend the decision. "Employee terminations can be categorized different ways depending on circumstances." "Ms. Brooks," Malik said, turning to Elena, "in your professional opinion, would excluding those terminated employees from retention calculations provide an accurate picture of workforce stability?" Elena looked uncomfortable but answered clearly. "No, it would not. Those exclusions would materially overstate our actual retention performance." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Every person in the room understood that the situation had fundamentally changed. This was no longer about whether Grant had authority to fire an intern. This was about whether Grant had fired Malik specifically to prevent accurate information from reaching investors. Rebecca consulted her notes. "Before we proceed further, I need to establish the chain of responsibility for these retention figures. Who specifically ordered that the terminated employees be excluded from the calculation?" She looked first at Grant, then at Tyler. "One of you will need to answer that question under this formal review." Both men stared at the spreadsheet on the table, understanding that their response would determine not just Malik's case, but their own futures at Westbridge Technologies. The silence in the boardroom stretched as Rebecca waited for an answer. Grant and Tyler exchanged glances, each understanding that their response would determine the outcome of the entire investigation. Tyler cleared his throat first. "The retention methodology we used was technically defensible under standard HR practices. Many companies exclude certain termination categories when calculating retention rates for investor materials." "Which categories were excluded?" Malik asked calmly. Tyler pulled up his own copy of the spreadsheet. "Employees terminated during probationary periods, seasonal workers whose contracts expired, and individuals who left due to performance issues that preceded the measurement period. Elena shook her head immediately. That's not accurate. I prepared the original termination list, and most of these employees were dismissed during routine cost-cutting measures, not performance issues. The point remains, Tyler continued, that retention calculations aren't universally standardized. Different methodologies can produce different results, all of which might be considered legitimate. Malik looked at the numbers on his printed spreadsheet. Let me walk through this calculation step by step. Westbridge employed 847 people at the beginning of the measurement period. During that same period, 127 employees left the company. Simple division shows a retention rate of approximately 85%. He circled several figures with his pen, but the version prepared for Carter Strategic excluded 39 of those departures. That changed the calculation to 88 departures out of 847 employees, which produces a retention rate of approximately 90%. Elena verified the math quickly. Those numbers are correct. The exclusions improved the reported retention rate by 5 percentage points. 5 percentage points represents a material difference when evaluating workforce stability, Malik continued, especially for an investment decision involving $150 million in financing that depends partly on operational continuity. Rebecca turned back to Grant and Tyler. Given that these figures were included in investor materials, I need to understand who specifically authorized excluding those 39 terminated employees from the retention calculation. Tyler attempted another technical defense. The methodology was developed through collaboration between HR and finance departments. Grant's patience finally snapped. Enough, Tyler. Just tell them the truth. You approved the reporting methodology. You signed off on every number that went into those materials. The words hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before Tyler realized what Grant had just done. I approved the methodology after you personally directed me to improve the retention figures however possible. Tyler shot back. You specifically told me that investor confidence depended on showing workforce stability, and you wanted numbers that demonstrated that stability. Grant's face reddened. I never told you to manipulate. You said, and I quote, "Find a way to make those retention numbers look better, or we'll lose the investment." Tyler continued. When I raised concerns about the exclusions, you overruled me and said the board presentation needed to show improvement. That's completely. I have your email directing finance to optimize retention reporting for maximum investor confidence. Tyler interrupted. Sent 2 days before the Carter strategic materials were finalized. The united front that Grant, Tyler, and Vanessa had maintained throughout the investigation crumbled completely. Instead of defending themselves together, Grant and Tyler were now contradicting each other's version of events, while Rebecca carefully documented every word. Vanessa attempted to interject. The retention methodology discussion was handled between executive leadership. Ms. Price, Rebecca said coldly, given your documented manipulation of Mr. Carter's employment record, your credibility regarding any aspect of this investigation has been severely compromised. Vanessa fell silent, understanding that her earlier attempt to falsify Malik's personnel file had destroyed her ability to influence the proceedings. Malik remained quiet while Grant and Tyler continued undermining each other's credibility. He didn't need to argue his case anymore. The executives who had laughed together while he carried a cardboard box were now desperately trying to shift blame to save their own positions. Rebecca called for a brief recess to allow the independent review committee to deliberate. When they reconvened 20 minutes later, her expression was grave but determined. The committee has reached its preliminary determination, she announced. Ms. Price manipulated official employment documentation after Mr. Carter's termination. Mr. Keene participated in preparing materially misleading investor information and has provided contradictory testimony about the authorization process. Mr. Halbrook retaliated against an employee who refused to participate in presenting inaccurate information to investors. She looked around the table at each of the three executives. The committee finds sufficient cause exists to recommend terminating all three individuals from their positions with Westbridge Technologies. Grant stared at the table in apparent defeat. Tyler closed his laptop with shaking hands. Vanessa gathered her papers as if preparing to leave. Rebecca opened her folder containing the final termination resolutions. We'll proceed immediately to the board vote on these recommendations. That's when Grant quietly reached for a different set of documents he had kept beside his chair throughout the meeting. His fingers found the folder containing his founder voting rights, the same super voting shares that would give him control until Malik's investment officially closed. Just as Rebecca opened her folder to begin reading the termination resolutions, Grant raised his hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice suddenly calm and controlled. "But I need to exercise certain shareholder rights before we proceed." Rebecca paused, her pen hovering over the documents. "What rights are you referring to, Mr. Halbrook?" Grant reached for the folder he had kept beside his chair throughout the entire investigation. He withdrew a set of documents that had been prepared hours earlier. "As you know, until the Carter strategic investment officially closes, I retain enhanced voting control through my founder shares." He placed the papers on the conference table. "I'm exercising those voting rights to remove 2 independent directors from this board, effective immediately. Dr. Patricia Wells and yourself, Ms. Sloan." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized what Grant was attempting. Vanessa looked up from her papers with sudden hope. Malik remained perfectly still, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Rebecca examined the documents quickly. "You're presenting written shareholder consent to remove sitting board members?" "That's correct," Grant replied. "The consent is properly executed and carries sufficient voting power under the current share structure." He leaned back in his chair. "Since you've been removed from the board, Ms. Sloan, you no longer have authority to conduct this termination proceeding." Elena spoke from her seat near the wall. "Can he actually do that?" Rebecca's voice was tight but professional. "Unfortunately, yes. Under Delaware corporate law and Westbridge's current Articles of Incorporation, holders of super voting shares can remove independent directors through written consent. This authority exists until the recapitalization becomes effective." She gathered the termination resolutions and placed them back in her folder. "Without a properly constituted board, we cannot proceed with the termination votes." Grant's confidence returned completely. He looked directly at Malik for the first time since the investigation began. "It appears we're back where we started, Mr. Carter, except now you understand exactly what you're dealing with." Tyler quickly grasped the implications. "The board composition has changed. Any actions taken by the previous board structure would need to be reconsidered under the new membership, including the findings against us," Vanessa added quietly. Grant stood and walked to the windows overlooking the office floor. "Now we can have an honest conversation about your options, Malik. And you do have options." He turned back toward the table. "Option 1, you can walk away from this investment, cancel the transaction, take your $150 million, and find another company to rescue. Westbridge will struggle without that financing, but we'll survive somehow." Malik finally spoke. "And option 2? You wire the money tomorrow as scheduled," Grant replied. "Your investment closes, but you're placing $150 million into a company where the current CEO has just demonstrated he will use every available tool to protect his position. You'll become the majority shareholder of a business actively led by someone who considers you an enemy. Grant moved closer to the table. Think about what that means, Malik. You'll own 51% of Westbridge, but I'll still run the daily operations. I'll still make the hiring decisions. I'll still control the strategic direction. And I'll remember exactly how this investigation started. Rebecca remained seated, but spoke clearly. Mr. Hellbrook, you're essentially threatening retaliation against the company's incoming majority shareholder. I'm explaining reality, Grant corrected. Corporate ownership and corporate leadership are different things. Malik can buy control, but he can't buy competence. He can't buy relationships. He can't buy 30 years of industry knowledge and operational experience. He looked around the room at Tyler and Vanessa, both of whom were carefully avoiding eye contact with Malik. The executives who built this company will still be here tomorrow. The employees who've worked under my leadership for years will still be here. The institutional knowledge that makes Westbridge valuable will still be here. Grant returned to his seat. What won't be here is trust. What won't be here is cooperation. What won't be here is the working relationship that successful companies require between ownership and management. Malik pulled out his copy of the Carter Strategic Investment Agreement, the same document Rebecca had placed on the table when his identity was first revealed. He flipped through the pages slowly, reviewing terms he had already memorized. The closing provision remained exactly as written. Upon effectiveness of Carter Strategic's $150 million investment, Westbridge's dual-class voting structure would automatically terminate. Grant's supervoting founder shares would convert to ordinary common stock. Carter Strategic would hold 51% of the total voting power. But that transformation would only occur after the money was wired, after the investment became irrevocable. After Malik had committed $150 million to a company whose CEO was promising to make his ownership as difficult as possible. Grant watched Malik read through the agreement. Here's what I think will happen, Malik. You'll protect your investment. You'll cancel the transaction rather than risk that much money on people you barely know. You met these employees as an intern for what? 2 weeks? You think that gives you enough insight to bet $150 million on their loyalty? He gestured toward the office floor beyond the glass walls. Those people have mortgages. They have families. They have career concerns. When forced to choose between a 19-year-old investor and the executives who sign their paychecks, what do you think they'll decide? Grant's voice became quieter but more intense. You can buy ownership, Malik, but you cannot buy belonging, and you definitely cannot buy respect. He placed both hands on the conference table and leaned forward. So, what's it going to be? Walk away and keep your money safe? Or wire $150 million and find out what it's really like to own a company where everyone knows you tried to destroy their leadership? Malik closed the investment agreement and placed it back on the table. He looked up at Grant, who was still leaning forward with his hands pressed against the mahogany surface. You're right about one thing, Malik said quietly. Corporate ownership and corporate leadership are different. Grant's expression shifted slightly. He had expected anger or negotiation. This calm response unsettled him. But you're wrong about something else, Malik continued. You think I'm here to rescue Westbridge because of the executives. I'm here because of everyone you consider replaceable. He stood up and walked toward the glass wall overlooking the office floor. Below, employees were working at their desks, unaware that their company's future was being decided above them. Tyler spoke up. Malik, be realistic. Grant controls this board now. Even if you close the investment, you'll be fighting uphill battles for months, maybe years. Will I? Malik asked without turning around. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Rebecca's number. Even though she was sitting right there, he called her directly. Rebecca's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then at Malik with confusion. "What are you doing?" "Answer it," Malik said. Rebecca pressed the green button. "Hello?" "Rebecca, this is Malik Carter, controlling shareholder of Carter Strategic Ventures. I need you to prepare the closing documents for our Westbridge investment." Grant laughed. "Are you seriously calling someone who's sitting right here? And she's been removed from the board, remember? She doesn't have authority to process anything." Malik ignored him. "Rebecca, under the signed recapitalization agreement, Carter Strategic's investment remains scheduled to close at 5 p.m. today. Has anything changed regarding that deadline?" Rebecca glanced around the room. "No. The investment agreement remains in effect regardless of board composition changes." "Good. Please prepare the wire transfer authorization. Carter Strategic Ventures is ready to fund the full $150 million investment." The room went silent. Grant's smile faded. "You're bluffing." Tyler leaned forward. "Malik, think this through. You're about to wire more money than most people will see in their lifetimes to a company where the leadership actively opposes you. I'm wiring money to a company where the employees deserve better leadership," Malik replied. He was still speaking into the phone, but his words were meant for everyone in the room. Vanessa finally spoke. "This is insane. You're going to bet everything on people you barely know?" Malik turned away from the window and looked directly at her. "I've learned more about these people in 2 weeks than you've learned in years. The difference is, I actually listened when they talked." He returned his attention to the phone. "Rebecca, please confirm receipt of the wire transfer authorization. I'm sending it now." Grant stood up quickly. "He's not serious. Nobody commits that kind of money out of spite." "This isn't spite," Malik said. He pulled up his banking app and navigated to the wire transfer section. "This is investment." His fingers moved across the screen. "Recipient: Westbridge Technologies recapitalization account. Amount: $150,000. Purpose: Series A, preferred investment per signed agreement, dated." Tyler was now standing too. "Malik, stop. Let's discuss this rationally. We can work out an arrangement that protects everyone's interests." "We had that discussion," Malik replied. "You decided to remove the people willing to hold you accountable." He completed the transfer authorization and submitted it. Grant's face had gone pale. "You actually did it?" "I actually did it," Malik confirmed. The room fell into tense silence. Everyone understood what would happen next, but nobody quite believed it was really happening. Malik's phone buzzed with a confirmation message from his bank. "Wire transfer of $150,000 to Westbridge Technologies has been processed and will be available within minutes." He showed the screen to Rebecca. "The funds are clearing now." Rebecca looked at her own phone as notifications began arriving from Westbridge's bank. Her expression became very serious. "I'm receiving confirmation that the investment funds have been received in full." Grant sank back into his chair. "This is a mistake. You're making a $150 million mistake." "Maybe," Malik said, "but it's my mistake to make." Rebecca was now reading through documents on her tablet. According to the recapitalization agreement, Carter Strategic's investment officially closes upon receipt of the full funding amount. The dual-class voting structure terminates immediately upon closing. She looked up at Grant. "Your founder shares have just converted to ordinary common stock." The transformation was instantaneous and automatic. No additional votes were required. No board approval was needed. The moment Malik's $150 million cleared Westbridge's account, Grant's enhanced voting power simply ceased to exist. Tyler was frantically reading through his copy of the investment documents. There has to be a waiting period, some kind of regulatory approval process. There isn't, Rebecca said flatly. The recapitalization was pre-approved by all necessary parties. Carter Strategic Ventures now holds 51% voting control of Westbridge Technologies. Malik looked directly at Rebecca. His voice carried quiet authority that hadn't been there moments before. "We're closed." Rebecca nodded and began typing on her tablet. "I'm reinstating the lawful board composition under the new voting structure. Your emergency removals no longer have effect, Mr. Halbrook." Grant stared at the 19-year-old who had just outmaneuvered him with the simplest possible strategy, doing exactly what he had promised to do from the beginning. The money was sent, the investment was closed, and Grant's final advantage had disappeared the moment Malik decided that some things were worth $150 million. Rebecca wasted no time. Within minutes of the investment closing, she had issued formal notices reinstating the proper board composition under Carter Strategic's majority voting control. "The emergency board meeting will reconvene immediately," she announced. "All lawfully appointed directors are hereby restored to their positions." Grant remained seated, but his posture had changed completely. The confident CEO who had controlled every conversation was gone. In his place sat a man watching his authority dissolve in real time. Tyler was still reading through the investment documents, searching for some provision that might delay what everyone knew was coming. There should be a transition period, some kind of procedural safeguard. The recapitalization agreement was negotiated and approved months ago, Rebecca replied. Mr. Halbrook signed the final documents himself. Every provision regarding the voting structure change was clearly specified. Vanessa had gone quiet. She understood better than anyone what the investigation had uncovered about her conduct. The falsified employment record sat in her personnel file like evidence at a trial she had already lost. Rebecca opened her tablet and began reading from prepared resolutions. The board will now consider termination for cause based on findings from the completed investigation. Each case will be presented based on documented evidence already gathered. She looked at Vanessa first. Vanessa Price, Chief People Officer. The investigation established that you altered Mr. Carter's employment record after his termination, adding a disciplinary warning that did not exist during his actual employment period. The HR system's version history provides irrefutable proof of when these changes were made. Vanessa's face flushed red. I was documenting previous conversations. Elena Brooks testified under oath that no such conversations occurred, Rebecca continued. Additionally, the system timestamps show you accessed the file 17 minutes after Mr. Carter was escorted from the building. Your actions constitute falsification of personnel records for the purpose of justifying an unlawful termination. Rebecca typed something on her tablet. The board finds sufficient cause for immediate termination. Vanessa Price is hereby dismissed from all positions within Westbridge Technologies, effective immediately. Vanessa stood up slowly. This is insane. I was protecting the company. You were protecting Grant? Malik said quietly. The company deserved accurate records. Rebecca moved to Tyler. Tyler Keene, Chief Financial Officer. The investigation established that you knowingly supported the presentation of misleading workforce retention figures to the board and to Carter Strategic Ventures. When questioned about authorization for these figures, you initially blamed Mr. Halbrook, then attempted to claim joint responsibility. Tyler's face remained calm, but his hands were clenched. Those figures were technically accurate based on the parameters we established. Parameters that excluded recently terminated employees in a way that materially misrepresented the company's retention rate, Rebecca replied. Additionally, When Mr. Carter questioned these figures, you advised Mr. Halbrook to dismiss him rather than address the accuracy concerns. She looked directly at Tyler. Your conduct violated your fiduciary duty to provide accurate financial information to the board and to prospective investors. The board finds sufficient cause for immediate termination. Tyler Keene is hereby dismissed from all positions within Westbridge Technologies, effective immediately. Tyler nodded slowly. He understood the game was over. I'll need time to transition my responsibilities. Security will escort you out, Rebecca said. Your access to company systems has been revoked. Finally, she turned to Grant. The room fell completely silent. Grant Halbrook, Chief Executive Officer and Founder. The investigation established multiple serious violations of corporate governance and employment law. First, you terminated Mr. Carter in direct retaliation for his refusal to alter accurate financial information. Second, you attempted to pressure Elena Brooks to falsify her performance evaluation of Mr. Carter. Third, you used your voting control to obstruct the board's investigation by removing independent directors. Grant was staring at the table, but he looked up when Rebecca continued. Most seriously, your actions created a pattern of retaliation against employees who refused to participate in misleading the board and investors. This conduct is incompatible with executive leadership and violates your fiduciary duties as CEO. Rebecca's voice remained steady and formal. The board finds sufficient cause for immediate termination. Grant Halbrook is hereby dismissed as Chief Executive Officer and removed from all management positions within Westbridge Technologies, effective immediately. Grant finally spoke. You have no idea what you're doing, Malik. Buying a company is completely different from running one. These people don't respect you. They're afraid of your money, but they don't respect you. Malik looked at him calmly. You're right. Running a company is different from buying one. That's why I'm keeping the employees who actually know how to do the work. Grant's jaw tightened. You think Elena Brooks can run finance? You think the people in operations understand strategic planning? You're about to learn why experience matters. I'm about to learn what happens when employees aren't afraid to tell the truth, Malik replied. The same people you called replaceable are the ones who kept this company running while you focused on protecting your authority. Rebecca was already typing termination letters. Security has been notified. Please collect your personal belongings and exit the building within 30 minutes. Grant stood up slowly. For the first time since Malik had known him, the CEO looked genuinely defeated. This isn't over. You can fire me, but you can't run this company like a college project. Reality is going to hit you hard. Malik remained seated. Then I'll handle reality when it comes. But I'll handle it with people who don't think lying to investors is acceptable business practice. Grant walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. You really think you won something here? I think the employees won something here, Malik said. I just made it possible. Grant left without another word. Tyler followed him out, his face expressionless. Vanessa was the last to leave, muttering something about lawyers under her breath. Rebecca closed her tablet. I'll handle the transition procedures. The executive team will need immediate replacements. Malik nodded. Elena can provide recommendations for interim leadership. She knows who's actually been keeping this place running. Through the glass walls, they could see employees watching as security escorted the three former executives through the corridor. Each carried a small cardboard box containing their personal items. The same corridor where Grant had mocked Malik 24 hours earlier. Elena appeared at the conference room door. She was holding something in her hand. I believe this belongs to you, she said, extending Malik's intern badge toward him. Malik took the badge and clipped it onto his jacket. the same denim jacket he had worn when Grant fired him. "I still have 3 weeks left on my internship, right?" he asked. Elena smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Be here at 8. Malik looked toward the boardroom where Rebecca was organizing transition documents. Then he looked through the glass walls at the employees who were slowly returning to their desks. Grant's voice echoed in his memory. "These people don't respect you." Maybe that was true. Maybe respect had to be earned through more than just firing the executives who had abused their power. But at least now, the employees could speak up without fear of retaliation. And that was worth $150 million. Malik walked toward the boardroom to begin the real work. Behind him, through the elevator doors that were closing, Grant Halbrook disappeared from view, carrying the same kind of cardboard box he had once mocked. The intern badge felt different on Malik's jacket now. Not because his title had changed, but because the company around that badge had finally become what it was supposed to be.